All right, hello there, APUS government. Today is PSAT day, which means a lot of you probably aren't in the building for whatever reason. So, since that is the case, and since we're going to do some asynchronous work today, I figured I would record some notes for you so that way we can get through some legislative branch stuff and get you well positioned for Friday. So, I'm assuming by the time I see you next time, whether that be Friday for A days or Monday for B days, that you will have watched this video, taken notes on it, and written down and brought in any questions that you may have. That is the assumption that I am working off of. So let's see where we get today in this video on Chapter 4, the legislative branch. I'm going to pick up here. I know in some classes we finished up talking about the filibuster, which is a Senate rule. It is not in the Constitution, but it is a Senate rule that has evolved over time. It has changed. The filibuster today does not look like it used to. Today, you no longer have to stand and hold the Senate floor and talk. Instead, you can simply refuse to vote for what's called cloture. So in the Senate, before you pass anything, you have to take 2 votes. The second vote, the one that actually passes the bill out of the Senate, you only need a majority. But before you can take that vote, you have to take what's called a cloture vote. And a cloture vote ends debate. It requires 60 votes. That means if you're the minority party, you can stop anything from being voted on by simply denying cloture. There's a couple of ways around the filibuster. Not everything can be filibustered. Filibuster rules were changed in the past couple of years so that approving federal judges can no longer be filibustered. There's a budget process called reconciliation where anything passed in a reconciliation bill cannot be filibustered. So you would only need a majority of senators to vote for it. However, you can't do anything in a reconciliation bill. It has to be budget related. So immigration, voting rights, gun laws, none of those can be passed with a simple majority in the Senate. They can only get to that majority vote if you can get 60 total votes. So that makes it very difficult to get anything done in the Senate. Proponents of the filibuster will say this encourages bipartisanship and consensus. People who want the filibuster rules to be changed say that this prevents anything substantive from being done. It would be possible to change the filibuster. It's not a law. It's not in the Constitution. It's a Senate rule. It could be changed with a majority vote. Nobody has wanted to do it because they are afraid of consequences. You don't like the filibuster when you're the majority party, but you like it when you're the minority party. And so filibuster rules have not have changed a little bit over time, but no one has gotten rid of it altogether. As far as special powers go, there's a few things that the Senate can do that the House cannot. If no candidate gets a majority in the Electoral College, the Senate picks the vice president. Remember, the vice president is technically the presiding officer in the Senate. So if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, the Senate is picking its presiding officer. The Senate also has control over ratifying treaties. The president can negotiate a treaty, but 2/3 of the Senate has to ratify a treaty in order for it to go into effect. 2/3 is a very high bar. That's very difficult. The Senate is in charge of confirming presidential nominees to things like federal judges and cabinet positions. That is only a majority vote. It's a majority vote to confirm federal judges. That includes the Supreme Court, and a majority vote to confirm people to cabinet positions and other high-level executive offices. If someone in the executive branch or the judicial branch is impeached, it takes 2/3 of the Senate to remove. It's only a majority in the House to impeach. That's an accusation. That's a relatively low bar. But it takes 2/3, that would be 67 senators, to remove. So no president has ever been removed from office through the impeachment process. Andrew Johnson dodged it by 1 vote in the Senate. And Richard Nixon certainly would have been removed in the Senate, but chose to resign instead. All right, let's talk about congressional committees. Before we get into types, one important thing that you need to know about congressional committees is that this is where the bulk of work on bills is done in Congress. Most work on bills is done in committees. So members of Congress actually spend relatively little of their time in their chamber as a whole House of Representatives or a whole Senate. Instead, they spend a lot of their time in committees. There's a few different types. The most important type to know is this first one, what's called standing committees. Standing committees are permanent, and they are made up of members of one of the two chambers. So, for example, the House Ways and Means Committee is a standing committee. It is permanent. It's made up of only members of the House. These are the committees that deal with bills. If a bill gets proposed, the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader will assign it to a relevant committee to be worked on. And we'll go through what that process looks like in a moment. So standing committees are very important, very powerful. The examples of committees that we're going to look at, most of them are standing committees. Select committees are made up of members of just one of the two chambers of Congress. And their job is to investigate certain topics or events. Typically, they carry out an investigation, they reach a conclusion, they release a report, and then they're done. So select committees are temporary, made up of members of just one of the two chambers of Congress. There is a House Select Committee on the events of the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. That is a select committee. It is temporary. They're conducting an investigation, and when they're done, they will release their findings in a report. A joint committee is very much like a select committee. It is temporary. The only thing that is different is that it is made up of members of both houses. So select committee, members of one house, joint committee, members of both. Conference committees we will deal with more when we talk about how a bill becomes a law. If a bill passes the House, it then goes to the Senate. If the Senate makes any changes to the bill, now we've got two different versions of this bill floating around. Then some members of the House and some members of the Senate will get together in what is called a conference committee. So a conference committee is temporary. It's made up of members of both houses, and its purpose is to iron out two different versions of a bill, come to a compromise that both houses then have to vote on again before it can go to the president's desk. Like I said, we're going to come back to conference committees because they play an important role in how a bill becomes a law. Last type, subcommittees. This is just a smaller type of a larger committee. So committee is going to be a small group of representatives or senators. A subcommittee, break it down even further into a narrower topic. And this link will take you to all the different committees currently active in Congress. We'll talk about some of the work done by committees. Some of this I'm going to ask you to look at in the reading so that we don't spend too much time here. But like I said before, most of the work that's done on bills is done in committee. Any representative or any senator can propose a bill. When it gets proposed, if it's going to be taken seriously by a committee, that's where most of the changes and most of the work gets done. There's members of both parties in these committees. And so these standing committees that are working on bills have members of both parties. They compromise, they take votes. If you're the majority party, you have a majority on the committee. That makes it easier to get your stuff done. Members of the committee might add something to a bill. So they might make an amendment. That's a change to a bill. Or they might add a rider, something extra to the bill that they're trying to slip through, basically. Maybe it's related to what's in the bill, maybe it's not, but it might be something a little bit extra, might be part of a compromise, part of a deal with the other party. Hey, if you'll include this, we'll actually vote for it and we'll help get it through committee. One term that you'll see in the reading is earmarks or pork. That is something that gets added to a committee that is only for the members of, only for the voters in a certain district. So let me give you an example. Our district is Virginia's second district, right? Virginia Beach, that's where we are. If something got added to a bill that only helped the people in our district, maybe some federal government money is going to go to open a museum in our district, or we're going to get federal highway funds to build a new bridge tunnel that would help ease traffic. If it's federal money, but it's only being spent in our district and it's only creating jobs here, then that is what's called an earmark or pork. It would be something that is designed to get the support of our local representative. Hey, I know you're on the fence about this bill, but we've added this thing that's going to be great for the people in your district. Now you should vote for it. So earmarks, pork, that is a great way to kind of have a little compromise chip with someone who maybe is of the other party, who wouldn't otherwise support the bill. But now we're going to help you out. We're going to make some jobs in your district so you can come support this bill. Poison pill is something you would add to a bill that would be so negative that it would make people vote against it. You're trying to kill the bill. Or a sweetener is the opposite. You're trying to get people's support. Maybe you don't think the president would sign this bill without adding a little something extra that the president can take credit for. An omnibus bill is a term for Congress loves these bills. You're trying to put everything into one big bill. If the budget has to get passed, we absolutely know Congress, that's the bare minimum that they have to pass to keep the lights on. So if we can add a bunch of extra stuff to it, because we know the budget bill is going to get passed anyway, we can create what's called an omnibus bill. It's a bill that is weighed down by a bunch of extra, maybe unrelated riders that otherwise wouldn't be part of this bill. It's an omnibus bill. Congress tries to accomplish a lot of stuff all in one bill so that they don't have to take a bunch of votes. And like I said, the majority party always holds a majority on the committee, and the committee chair is always a member of the majority party. All right, I'm going to give you some examples of congressional committees. I have seen all of these show up on the AP exam before, and all of them are standing committees except for the Committee of the Whole, which is kind of a goofy example, and we'll get to that. But the rest of these are standing committees. So the House Ways and Means Committee, obviously it's only members of the House. They are going to deal with tax and revenue bills. Remember, all tax and revenue bills have to start in the House. So that makes the Ways and Means Committee very powerful. They deal with tax and revenue bills. They get to see those first. They get the first crack at compromise and changes to them, so they're very important. The House Rules Committee gets to see every single House bill before it makes it to the floor of the House. They get to decide how long are we going to spend debating this and what kind of changes are we going to allow House members to make to it. So they get to set the rules for debate for every bill before it hits the floor. Again, that's a very powerful House committee. They can say, look, you can't make any changes to this bill. You're either voting yes or no on it. So the House Rules Committee gets to see every bill before it hits the floor, and they get to determine what, if any, changes can be made to it and how long they're going to spend debating it. The House Committee of the Whole is a bit strange when you hear it. When you hear it as a concept. Remember, rules for debate in the House are very strict. You have to follow this parliamentary procedure in order to get anything done. But rules in a committee are a little more loosey-goosey. So sometimes the Speaker will adjourn the whole House of Representatives into what's called the House Committee of the Whole. It is a committee that is technically made up of all 435 members. So it is the entire House of Representatives, all technically in committee format, makes it a little easier to get things done faster without having to follow those strict parliamentary rules for procedures. There's still rules when you're in committee, but it's not quite as tough to get something done. So they'll become a committee technically, of all 435 members. And then when they're done, they'll go back into session as the House. A little bit weird. It's just a work around those strict rules for debate. 3 standing committees in the Senate that are very important. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is going to deal with treaties, is going to deal with confirming ambassadors. So that makes them very important. The Senate Judiciary Committee is going to be the ones to interview all federal judges and offer their recommendation as to whether to confirm a federal judge or not. That's federal judges at all levels, including the Supreme Court. So the Senate Judiciary Committee is also very important. For some reason in the past, the AP exam has asked before about a committee that a senator from the South or Midwest might want to join. They're looking for either the Senate Agriculture Committee or the House Agriculture Committee. Right? They're just trying to make sure you understand that some regions of the country are going to have a particular interest. So if you're from the Midwest, you might want to be on the House Agriculture Committee. That's going to be more important to you than if you're from, say, Los Angeles. Probably not going to have as much of an interest in being on the House Agriculture Committee. I've mentioned chairs before. The committee chair is the leader of the committee. They're in charge of procedure, recognizing people to speak and making sure things stay on topic. People follow parliamentary procedure, speak when it's their turn, stay on topic, ask questions when they're supposed to be asking questions. There are 3 requirements to being a committee chair, and one is actually more of a suggestion. It's not so much a requirement anymore. This is something that's changed over time. You are always a member of the majority party to be a committee chair. You cannot chair any other committee. You can only chair one. And it used to be a recognized tradition, used to be kind of well established, that the longest continuously serving member of the committee would get to be the chair. But that's no longer always the case. In the House, the Speaker, or in the Senate Majority Leader might use committee chairs to reward their political allies and punish their political opponents. So this is more of a tradition. You might expect, if you're the longest serving member, that you get to be the committee chair, but it's no longer a requirement. Now, if you're in the House, you want to be close to the Speaker and get along with them if you want to be chair of a sweet committee. All right, so that's a lot for committees. That's a lot of where the work gets done. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about congressional caucuses. So we're no longer talking about committees. Committees are formal parts of Congress. It's not written into the Constitution, but they are institutionalized very much in the rules of Congress. Caucuses are much more informal. We might use this word coalitions. These are groups of like-minded members of the House or members of the Senate. They're working towards some kind of common objective. So members of Congress, maybe it's only members of the House, maybe it's only members of the Senate, maybe it's members from both chambers. They're working together towards some kind of common objective. Maybe you are all environmentally conscious, and so you get together with other environmentally conscious members of the House of Representatives. You form what's called a caucus. You meet together, you discuss issues, maybe you coordinate your votes on certain bills to try to project power. If you're in the House, you're one of 435. Your power as a single member of the House tends to be relatively limited. But if you can band together with other people, you can wield a lot more power, and that can make you much more of a force to be reckoned with. So committees, like I said before, committees are institutionalized. They're part of the rules of the House and the Senate. Caucuses are much more informal, but it's sort of like alliances within the House and within the Senate. So a few examples of this: the Congressional Black Caucus is members of both chambers, the House and the Senate. It's bipartisan. It's open to Republicans and Democrats. It's made up of any African American member of Congress who wants to join. In the House, you've got the House Freedom Caucus, which is a very, very conservative caucus in the House. They tend to be kind of a thorn in the side of the Republican leadership in the House. Then you've got the Tuesday Group, which is also a Republican group, but they're much more moderate in the House. And I'm sure you can guess which day of the week the Tuesday Group likes to meet on. The Progressive Caucus in the House is, like the name says, very liberal. They are currently trying to negotiate with House leadership, with members of the Senate, with the White House on the economic bills being debated in both houses. They're trying to have higher taxes and more government programs that are going to do more for people, because that's what it means to be more liberal and more progressive. So these are Democrats in the House who are trying to pull the party to the left a little bit, or a lot of it. And then you've got the Problem Solvers Caucus. This is in the House of Representatives. This is a bipartisan group, and they are all about compromise and moderation. So is there anywhere that the two sides can overlap? It's been a tough few years for the Problem Solvers Caucus, but they're trying out there. They're the little caucus that could. Around the issue of elections, you may have heard the word caucus before, like the Iowa caucuses. This is one of the annoying things about government and political science, is that sometimes we'll use the same word to mean different things. For our purpose in this chapter, the term caucus refers to these alliances, these coalitions within the House and within the Senate of individual members of the House and individual senators trying to band together to amplify their power. That's what that word caucus is going to mean in this chapter. When we talk about elections in the future, we will use the same word to mean something different. It's very annoying, it's very frustrating, and it makes you rely on context. So if you've got questions about that, by all means, please ask next time I see you. All right, let's talk a little bit about how the legislative branch interacts with the other branches. Remember, Federalist number 51 is going to deal with checks and balances and the interaction of the legislative branch with the other branches. It's up to Congress. This is a congressional power of Congress to pass the budget. The president gets to propose a budget. Congress typically laughs at his budget and throws it out. Congress gets to appropriate money. Appropriate means to Congress gets to determine how money gets spent. That's what we mean when we're talking about passing the budget. When Congress appropriates money, they are saying, here's how spending is going to happen. That's called the power of the purse, and it's a huge power of Congress. Congress gets to determine how the federal budget gets spent. Of course, if the president vetoes a bill, Congress can override a veto with a 2/3 vote in both houses. This tends to happen when the two branches are fighting over their power as a branch. Overriding a veto tends to be less about partisanship and more about Congress trying to defend its power as a branch from the president taking on more power. The Senate, like I said before, has to approve treaties with a 2/3 vote. Cabinet members and federal judges have to be confirmed by a majority vote in the Senate. Impeachment is a check from Congress on the executive branch. Impeachment and removal, don't forget, two different things. Over time, Congress's power to declare war has changed. Congress still has the power to declare war according to the Constitution, but the last time Congress declared war was World War II. Obviously, it has not all been world peace and kumbaya since World War II. Things have changed with the relationship between Congress and the president when it comes to declaring war. During the Vietnam War, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, in which they gave up a great deal of their war-making power to the president. They basically gave the president broad power to use his commander-in-chief power to make war without Congress really having to declare it. When they looked back on Vietnam and saw what a disaster that was, Congress passed the War Powers Act to try to take some of that power back. They overrode Richard Nixon's veto on the War Powers Act to get it passed. So, under the War Powers Act, the way this works is that the president can send troops into battle as long as the president notifies Congress within 48 hours. And then the president has 60 days to get congressional authorization to use military force. It's not necessarily a declaration of war. It's just an authorization to use military force. Is that war by any other name? Sure, you could make that argument. After September 11th, with the so-called War on Terror, President George W. Bush got an authorization for the use of military force to go into Afghanistan, to go after al-Qaeda, and that authorization for the use of military force was so broadly written that it formed the basis for future military action in Syria, Libya, other parts of the world that we are still dealing with some of the ramifications of that today. So that authorization for the use of military force, it can be broad, it can be vague, and it tends to give the president lots of discretion over the use of military power. So, like this says at the bottom, over time, Congress's power has decreased, the president's power has increased. We will definitely see more of that when we get into our executive branch chapter, which will be the next one. When it comes to the president and the president's power to check Congress, the president can veto bills. The president can pass executive orders. Executive orders have the force of law, but don't need Congress. There's lots of limits on what can be done by executive order. The president can't repeal a law, can't directly contradict an existing law, but it does give the president pretty broad freedom to affect policy without needing Congress. So executive orders come with a lot of power. The president determines how to enforce the law. Remember, take marijuana, for example. It is still technically illegal to buy, sell, possess marijuana. It is still a federal crime. But the executive branch over time has backed off of enforcement, even though the law hasn't changed. And the president has the power to negotiate with other countries to make treaties. They have to be ratified by the Senate, but the president does have the power to negotiate those treaties. The president is our chief diplomat, our representative to the rest of the world. The legislative branch's interaction with the judicial branch is much simpler. The judicial branch has the power of judicial review, the power to declare laws unconstitutional. That power, of course, comes from Marbury versus Madison. It is up to the Senate by majority vote to confirm federal justices. That's at all levels of federal court: federal district judges, federal appeals judges, and federal Supreme Court justices. If the Senate rejects a Supreme Court nominee, they are said to have been borked. That's named after a guy, Robert Bork, who was rejected by the Senate. It's not a term that's ever going to show up on a test. It's just kind of interesting. He was in Richard Nixon's White House. He worked for Nixon. He was nominated to the Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan, and the Senate rejected him. And so now, if a Supreme Court justice is rejected by the Senate, we say that that person was borked. It's up to Congress to establish lower courts. So the Constitution only provides for a Supreme Court. It's up to Congress to create district courts and courts of appeals. And Congress may impeach and remove federal judges just like they can impeach and remove a president. It's the same process. Impeachment with a majority vote in the House, removal by 2/3 of the Senate. All right. The bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is not technically a separate branch. The bureaucracy is all federal government employees, unelected federal government employees. But these would be like the cabinet departments and the various federal government agencies and commissions. These agencies and commissions and departments are created by Congress and given their mission by Congress. Congress has this power called oversight over these congressional or over these cabinet departments, commissions, agencies, and whatnot. So they have oversight. They're allowed to have hearings, call these federal employees in front of a congressional committee and yell at them for doing something wrong, make them defend their actions. This committee, this agency might be going away. Maybe there's a sunset provision saying once after a certain amount of time, this commission is going to go away. So maybe at this hearing, if you're a federal government employee, you have to defend the existence of your commission or your agency. Congress has the power of the purse. They determine funding for bureaucratic agencies. When Congress makes laws, they often empower the bureaucracy to fill in the gaps. Congress doesn't answer every question in the law. They leave it up to these bureaucratic agencies. So when I say fill in the gaps, here's an example. What percentage of a jar of peanut butter has to be actual peanut butter, and how much of it is allowed to be filler? That's not the kind of question that Congress is going to spend its time on. Instead, they're going to let the Food and Drug Administration figure that out and make regulations. So these bureaucratic agencies are allowed to make regulations. Congress delegates some authority to these bureaucratic agencies and says, hey, you figure it out, you make the regulations, and we don't want to waste our time with this. So we're going to leave some gaps, and we're going to let these bureaucratic agencies be in charge of filling in those gaps with the rules and regulations that they make. We will deal with the Iron Triangle much more later on, but basically the bureaucracy, congressional committees, and outside interest groups all work together to try to get policy made. So the three parts of what we call the Iron Triangle are bureaucratic agencies, congressional committees, and outside interest groups who work together to try to make and pass legislation. Okay, that's pretty good. We will pick up with congressional elections next time. So make sure if you've got questions, if there's anything from today that you don't understand, definitely let me know next time I see you, and I will answer those questions. But otherwise, we'll pick up with congressional elections, and then we will go from there. So I hope you enjoyed your PSAT day wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you in class next time.